we are going to discuss is abnormal LFTs, and it's a very common problem nowadays, detected on routine health checkups, pre-op screenings, and in today's world of lifestyle diseases, NFLD being very common. So see an abnormal LFT report is very common. And to speak on this topic, we have Dr. G.S. Lamba, who is a chief gastroenterologist at Action Balaji Institute, has been a faculty member at prestigious GB Pant Hospital, and has many publications in the international journal to his credit, and is above all a very teacher par excellence. So may I invite Dr. G.S. Lamba for his deliberation.
Shriram has already said is about a very common clinical situation which all of us physicians and clinicians face every day, and the situation is that there is a person who went for a routine health checkup, or before a job he went for a health checkup, and there he got his LFT done, and the report came back with raised transaminases, that means raised SGOT-PT in that report. And this led to a chain of events. The patient became very anxious. He Googled, he tried to find out what is wrong, and then came out with a conclusion that there's something wrong with his liver. And then he comes and walks into our clinic with this report, and he's very anxious and tense. The relatives are tense that something is wrong with his liver. And doctor, please help me. A situation which we find every day, So now from that moment, when he comes to us, the onus now shifts to us that we have to interpret this report, try to find out its significance, and then try to find out what is the cause behind it, and then obviously give an answer to our patient. So I think situation is very common, and if we look at the literature also, about 1 to 9% of asymptomatic population may have raised transaminases, which is pretty common. That means it is pretty common a situation. And in fact, in one US survey, which was very meticulously done, they found out that about 8.9% of the patients of the healthy population had raised transaminases. So it is a problem which we'll face every day. But unfortunately, despite this thing being so common, till now, we do not have any definite guidelines from any major society in the world which tells us how to approach this patient. So all of us somehow have our own approach, and we try to work in our own way. So things might become slightly confusing at times. So my aim today is just to, just in a brief way, to tell everybody that what should be the approach to these patients and how we can best make use of resources and trying to find out the cause of these raised transaminases in an asymptomatic patient. So whenever now this patient walks in, there's always a dilemma in our mind. And that this dilemma is basically, is there any significance of this report? The patient is asymptomatic, he's absolutely healthy. Is there any significance of this report? And our first reaction usually is to get it repeated from a different lab. Okay, that's fair enough. Second is, now, how to investigate this patient further? There are so many causes of raised liver enzymes. So where do we start? Where do we end? Do we go start with major investigation first? Or what to do? There's again a dilemma in our mind. The third is, to what extent to investigate? Because there is no limit to investigation these days. There's everything is available. All the tests are available. Do we take all the patients still liver biopsy, or we individualize, we make decisions on an individual basis? That's another dilemma. And then most important thing, I think, is how to relieve our patient's anxiety, because that is what we are for, and how to satisfy him and his relatives that his liver is, whether his liver is diseased or whether his liver is not diseased. So this is a dilemma which we all face. And this is what I'm going to clarify today. Now, just for recapitulation, the transaminases, when I talk about raised liver enzymes, basically we are meaning raised transaminases. We are not going into other liver enzymes at the moment for this lecture because the time does not permit that. So transaminases are basically aspartate aminotransferase and alanine aminotransferase, which are now known as AST and ALT, previously known as SGOT, SGPT. These are basically hepatic enzymes which catalyze the transfer of amino groups and to make pyruvate and oxaloacetate. AST, as we all know, is found both in cytosol as well as mitochondria, whereas ALT is predominantly found in the cytoplasm and to some extent in the mitochondria. Whenever there is a disruption of the cell membrane, or there is disruption or the cell necrosis, these enzymes are released from the cells and then they go into blood where their levels can be measured. Now, if we look at the specificity for liver disease, definitely ALT is more specific than AST as far as liver disease is concerned. But what important thing we have to know is that both these enzymes have got some extrahepatic sources also, especially the AST, but also ALT. They have some non-hepatic sources of these enzymes also. And these non-hepatic sources are almost ubiquitous. They are found in heart, they are found in muscle, they are found in kidney, brain, pancreas, lung, blood cells. So these enzymes are found in cells everywhere in the body. So a disorder of any of them can cause a rise in these enzymes also. So this is something which we should remember in the back of our mind. But otherwise, ALT is more specific than AST as far as liver disease is concerned. Now, when we look at these levels, the levels are not constant. We obviously have a range of normal values, and these levels may change due to various physiological conditions. There is a definite diurnal variation in the level of these enzymes, so it depends on when the blood sample was taken. Exercise increases both SGOT and SGPT. ALT or AST both are increased with exercise, so that is also a factor which may affect the level of these enzymes in the blood. Different races have got different normograms, different normal values. So again, we should know that what particular normal values are there in the population which we are seeing. And then there are gender variations also. The males generally tend to have higher levels of enzymes than females. So all these factors are there when we are trying to interpret the results of raised transaminases. Now, when we talk about the normal value of anything, basically when the normograms are constructed, it basically is mean plus minus 2 standard deviations. So that means about 95% of the population will fall in that bell curve, in that 2 standard deviations plus or minus. But that also gives us this information that about 5% of the normal population will fall beyond these normal ranges, whether towards the lower side or higher side. This is normal statistics. So we should keep this in mind also when we are looking at a patient and we are deciding what to do with him, that 5% of the population will fall outside the mean plus minus 2 standard deviation range. And that is what statistics are all about. Now, coming to the normal values, the previously accepted normal values, as we all know, I think this is a group mainly of pathology, everybody knows, was about 10 to 55 in male and about 7 to 13 the females, and AST of 10 to 40 and 9 to 32 in females. This is something which is prevalent all over. There may be some differences in different labs. But recently, there has been an interest in data has emerged and various studies have emerged which have shown that probably what we were considering normal towards the higher side is not actually normal, and these normograms generally gave some higher values to what they should have, and the actual values are slightly lower than what these normograms showed. So a normal value now which is being proposed, and which revised value which is being proposed and which is being proposed for making clinical decisions, treatment decisions, is that probably ALT, a normal value in males is about 30, and a normal value of ALT in female is about 1920 international units per ml. So this is something which is new, which is coming up, that the normal values are less than what we previously used to think. And basically, this is because when previously the normograms were created, they did not exclude some of the things which we now know are quite prevalent in the normal population also, something like a metabolic syndrome or a NASH, or hepatitis C virus infection, which was not incorporated at that time when these normograms were constructed. So many patients who were apparently thought to be normal were actually not normal. They were having NASH. So their values were included in the normal range. So this was the reason for doing this. So basically, the aim of reducing these is to exclude probable NASH and hepatitis C from this normal population. Now, we have some Indian data on this also. We have this one study from Vedanta Medicity, where normal Indian persons were taken, and histology was done in all the persons because these were potential liver donors. And it was seen that the normal values in the males was about of ALT was about 33 and 31 in female, and an AST level of the normal was 38 in males and about 35 in females. So we have our own data which also suggests. We have one more study from PGI Chandigarh, where healthy subjects were taken, and it was the persons who had a normal BMI and a normal lipid profile, only those were taken in this group. And then they studied the normal values and found that ALT levels were around 22 in this group and AST of 21. So this is what we have to remember now, that what we thought as normal is probably the levels are coming down. This is the current information which we have. Now, before I move on to the how to interpret and how to investigate this patient, some of the usual facts, because I find a lot of confusion about these things in the mind of residents and some of my non-gastro colleagues, is that elevated transaminases do not always indicate that patient has got a liver disease. And this I've already said, there may be non-hepatic causes of liver, raised enzymes also. So elevated transaminases do not always indicate that patient has a liver disease. Normal transaminases, on the other hand, do not indicate that patient does not have liver disease. You see, a patient may be full-blown cirrhotic, but may have normal enzymes. He may have marked hepatocellular dysfunction, but normal enzymes. So we have to keep this in mind also. And thirdly, level of rise does not indicate what is the degree of liver damage. Extensively fibrocirrhotic patient may have enzymes which are about 1 to 2 times higher, whereas in some other patient, because just mild hepatitis, may have enzymes which are 5 to 10 times higher. So degree of rise does not indicate the degree of liver damage. So we should keep all these 3 points in our mind when we are dealing with these patients. Now, coming to what could be the possible etiology in a person who has got raised enzymes. Now, this is a very poor slide, I know. This is a slide which is not meant to be read. But why I could have divided into 4 or 5 slides, but why I wanted to keep it in one slide was that I just want to make everybody aware that this is the problem we are dealing with. There are so many causes. There may be 50 causes of raised transaminases. So we have to, when we are dealing with these patients, we have to filter out what is the cause in this particular patient. So that makes the things very difficult. So this is basically to show that this is the magnitude of etiology, with possible etiology, which could be there behind the raised transaminases. So we have to be patient. We have to approach systematically to reach to the correct diagnosis. So if we take the help of, try to take the help of studies, now what is more prevalent and what is less prevalent, again, this data does not help us, because there's a great variability in data of what was the probable etiology in these asymptomatic patients. And this basically variability is because it depends on various factors, where that study population came from, which area of the world, what are the liver diseases which are prevalent in that particular area, what is the prevalence of hepatitis B and C, what was the prevalence of hepatitis B in that particular geographical area, because that will also affect the results. And it also depends in that particular study to what extent the investigator investigated their patients, whether they left it less than liver biopsy or less than a fibroscan, whether they went to second line investigations or not. So this all creates a lot of variability in our data. So it's very difficult to take help from the data also. I'll just put on 2 studies which were there. This was a study which was published in Journal of Gastroenterology, in which they said that 70% they could not identify the cause. They were cryptogenic. So cause was identified in 31%. But then in this study, they did not investigate to that extent. And the causes they found obviously were mainly alcohol and hepatitis B and C and hemochromatosis in that population. But many of the cryptogenic group probably represented a metabolic syndrome or NASH, which they did not try to investigate. So this study that way doesn't help us. So on the contrary, there was another study which was more meticulously done, in which there was extensive testing for metabolic diseases was done. Liver biopsy was done in all the patients. And this was a study about 150 patients, in which they found, obviously they found many more causes. So basically it depends on how far and how meticulously you investigate your patients. So you can label them to be having a particular cause, or whether they are cryptogenic. So my point of showing these 2 studies was that data doesn't help us that what is the prevalence. We have to find out what is the common causes in our population of these raised enzymes. But one thing which I found in most of the studies was that if you pull in all the studies, there were 3 important causes which emerged in all the studies. And these 3 causes were non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, especially the recent studies, alcoholism, and chronic viral hepatitis. So whatever were the other causes, these 3 were always there in most of the studies. So whenever we approach these patients, our first line should be to start with these etiologies and investigate on these lines. So this is a consensus from the studies which we can make. Now coming to, as I mentioned, alcohol is one of the common cause. Some of the common clues which we can have from LFT about alcohol is that AST, ALT both are high, but interestingly, AST, although it's not so specific for liver disease, is about twice as compared to ALT. And if we see this ratio, we can suspect that this patient has got alcohol, especially if we look at other liver enzymes and we find an increased GGT also. This can give us a clue that probably we are dealing with alcohol. Now, coming to non-alcoholic part, I'll just spend a couple of slides on this because this is emerging out to be the most common cause in most of the regions of the world of asymptomatic rise in liver enzymes. This is a condition which is known as NAFLD. The term was coined in 1980, but then a lot of studies came on NAFLD. Nowadays, it's a very hot burning topic in gastroenterology. In this, basically, it's a condition when there is no history of significant alcohol intake. The ultrasound findings are suggestive of fatty liver, just like an alcoholic liver. And the biopsy also shows fatty liver with various degrees of inflammation and fibrosis, what we see in alcoholic patients. Now, by definition, it means 5% fat amount of about 5% when a vesicular fat in about 5% of hepatocytes, or a total liver weight which has a 5% content as fat. So this is what a fatty liver is. Now, it is basically a big group of disease, histological diseases, because this is basically NAFLD is a histological diagnosis, but it encompasses various subsets, which include steatosis, in which there's only fat. Then we have steatohepatitis, where there's lipid, fat plus inflammation. And then we have steatohepatitis with fibrosis. And then we have steatohepatitis with cirrhosis. So these are 4 pathological spectrums of this disease. And this, interestingly, is now the most prevalent in most of the countries of the most prevalent cause of chronic liver disease in many parts of the world, whether it's Asia or Europe or Middle East. So it's like an epidemic which is there, because obesity is an epidemic. So is NASH, because this is associated with obesity and other features of metabolic syndrome. And 90% of NAFLD patients may have at least one feature of metabolic syndrome, which might include a central obesity or a hypertriglyceridemia, hypertension, impaired GTT, diabetes, or a low HDL. So since NASH is now such a common cause for this raised liver enzymes, I think investigation for metabolic problems becomes a very important step whenever we get a patient who's got a raised enzymes and is otherwise asymptomatic. Now, I'll just skip these. Now, what happens as a natural history to these patients who come with raised enzymes? Because many a times we like to wait, and we tell them, okay, do not do anything. You come back after 3 months with another LFT, and then we will see. Now, we have studies on this also who tried to find out the course over the 6 months. And it was seen that about 28% of these patients will have a persistent rise in SGOT-PT. About 36% will have intermittent rise, that they might have a normal values in between, but then again the values will rise. And in about 1/3 of the patients, there may be isolated rise of SGOT or isolated rise of SGOT, which may persist, whereas the other value may become normal. So in most of the patients, it was seen that some abnormality is persisting, whether throughout continuously or intermittently. So this should also guide us in whether how we investigate these patients. So moving on now to the actual topic, how to approach these patients. Unfortunately, as I've said, there are no definite guidelines. The decision still remains at the level of the particular physician and a particular patient. We have to do a lot of individualization. We have to see the socioeconomic background of the patient. We have to see the clinical setting in which the patient is coming. We have to see the cost of affordability. So although at the end of my talk, I would be giving an algorithm, but I know that even when I sit in an actual real world clinical practice, I have to make a lot of adjustments, and I have to do a lot of micro adjustments for a given patient, depending on all these factors. So, but what we can do in all the patients, and what it comes very easy, is a detailed history and physical examination. I think it's a 30-year teaching that this is very important in all diseases, but here it becomes even more important, because if you remember that etiology slide which I showed, we are dealing with so many causes. So at least we need some clue or some headway, which side should we move. So a good history and physical examination can give us those clues, and I think that would help us in taking that path when we start investigation. Now, in the history, basically, first of all, we have to exclude the three commonest causes. First is the viral hepatitis, for which we can take history of surgery, blood transfusion, a history of drug abuse, a history of unsafe sexual practices, a history of tattoo, and all these things, which might indicate that this patient might be having a viral underlying silent viral hepatitis. So this becomes important history. Alcohol is another important cause. So we have to take a history of alcohol, and a caution here, because usually our experience is that patients deny history of alcohol or will not give a correct history of alcohol. So history of alcohol has to be taken from the patient, from the relatives, and when they are not together, only then the patient might come out with a true history of alcohol. And lastly, we have to take a history of diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia. This becomes very important because NASH is now becoming the leading cause of asymptomatic silent rise in liver transaminases. So history is important. But besides this, other important histories are history of medication. Again, when we talk about a history of medication, patients usually volunteer with the prescription medicines. They will show us a prescription, look, these are the medicines we are taking. But what they will not volunteer to say out is what they are taking over the counter, or if they are taking any indigenous or herbal preparations. And now these herbal and indigenous preparations are one of the important, probably the most important cause of a drug-induced liver disease. So we have to extract that history from the patients. Is he taking something for his diabetes, for a borderline diabetes which he's having? Is he taking any herbal preparation for virality or other things which patients are preserving his youth or whatever it may be? Because there's a general trend to take these things. They are available over the counter and they are available on the net. So people start taking this and they do not come out with history. It's very important to get this history because that will save us with a lot of labor, which we will be unnecessarily doing in investigating this patient. Secondly, because there can be non-hepatic causes of raised enzymes, we have to take history of comorbid conditions. And the most important of them obviously are congestive heart failure, a thyroid disorder, a celiac disease. So we should try to extract history for this. History of occupation also becomes important sometimes because this helps us in telling us that various toxins which a patient may be exposed to. So try to find out as much from the history because that will save your money on investigations. Physical examination, like all other diseases, we have to do a complete physical examination, look for stigmata of liver disease. Para-abdominal examination is important. And large spleen may straight away give us a clue that this patient is probably having portal hypertension. A nodular firm liver may straight away say that this is a patient of cirrhosis. So it becomes important. And so is important to look at other systems, the cardiac, or look for signs of hypothyroid on physical examination or hyperthyroidism on physical examination. This we must do because this comes free of cost. So once we have done history and physical examination, now the step is whether we repeat LFT or we go for further investigation. Now, this is something again, which is a question mark. As I had shown you one study, most of these patients will have some kind of abnormality, which will be persistent. So you can start investigating right here at this step only. So my approach at this stage generally is that if in the history, if we get a history of use of some non-essential medication or some herbal preparation, or if we get a history of significant alcohol consumption. So the first thing I tell them is to stop this and then get their repeat LFT after 2 to 3 months at least and see if they are still high. So I think if we want to wait and then if we get this particular history and this history is very convincing that this might be the cause of raised transaminases, then we can ask them to stop the drug, especially if it is not essential. Stop all herbal preparations, stop all indigenous preparations, stop alcohol, and do a repeat testing. And if the testing is high, then we start investigating them further. Now, some of the clues which we can get from ALT, which can help us in directing our investigations are: one, the AST-ALT levels. Second, what is the ratio between AST and ALT? And what is the value of other liver enzymes? Because this can give us a clue now where to start our investigations from. Now, as we know, if there's a marked elevation of AST-ALT, then there are only 3 causes. If they are more than 20 times, let's say in thousands, it's either acute viral hepatitis, toxin-induced hepatitis, or ischemic hepatitis. But then these conditions are very well, these are always symptomatic. So this is not the group of patients we are talking about today. We are talking about asymptomatic, totally healthy patients. So this generally goes out of today's lecture, because in these cases the patients will always be symptomatic. But the patients which will group which we are talking about is those who have mild to moderate elevation, in which the causes can be NFLD, ALD, chronic viral hepatitis, chronic hepatitis of other etiologies, drug or toxin induced, and other non-hepatic causes. So this is this way the levels can help us to some extent. The ratio is important sometimes, especially the ratio of AST-ALT. If it is more than 2 in alcoholic patients, it's very typical of alcoholic patients. It may be also be seen in NFLD or HCV or Wilson's disease. But if the ratio is more than 3, then there is quite likelihood that we are dealing with a patient where alcohol is the cause of raised AST-ALT. We should always look at other liver parameters also besides AST and ALT. And for example, if AST-ALT ratio is more than 2 and there's a raised GGT, then obviously this patient is most likely patient who's consuming a significant amount of alcohol, and that is the cause of raised ALT, AST. And similarly, if the ratio is more than 2, but alkaline phosphatase along with it, the alkaline phosphatase bilirubin ratio is less than 4. So this probably indicates that it's a patient of Wilson's disease who's decompensating very fast. So this ratio may be important in some cases. Now, when we start now the investigation of these patients, the first thing which I get done is markers for chronic viral infection, not only because they are one of the most common causes of raised enzymes, but also because we have a lot of now screening programs, government programs, where we are screening camps for these diseases, because these diseases are now potentially very much treatable and curable. So this is, I think, the right time to get hepatitis B and C screening in these patients. And I think this should be done in all your patients who come with the raised transaminases. For hepatitis B, we can get a hepatitis B surface antigen and a total core, as Dr. Monica said, told in the previous lecture. And then for HCV, we can get anti-HCV done. It's the right time to screen them, and it is always beneficial. We will definitely catch some patients, and I think we will be doing a great deal of service to that patient before his liver becomes damaged or becomes cirrhotic. We can almost cure him of his virus. The question which comes here is, now how far to investigate for viral hepatitis? Now, this is again something which I don't have an answer for, whether we should go for HBV DNA and HCV RNA, or we should stop at anti-HCV and HBS. Now, this is something which is very difficult to answer from the literature. We have to individualize. We have to see the socioeconomic, because these tests are costly. We have to see the socioeconomic condition of the patient and then decide on the individual basis. So after excluding the viral hepatitis, next step which we should do in all the patients now is to look for his metabolic profile. Again, this is, we are looking for NASH, one of the commonest causes, and this should be done in all the patients, because in this way, probably we might catch up his diabetes. We may catch up on some dyslipidemia which he's having. So the investigation which should be done in all our blood sugar fasting PP, maybe a hemoglobin A1C also, if the patient is obese, middle-aged, hemoglobin A1C should also be done. Lipid profile complete should be done. And ultrasound, which is a very simple investigation and which can pick up a fatty liver also. So this is something which I get it done in all my patients who come with raised transaminases. So starting with, after history physical examination, if there's no clue, start with markers, go on to metabolic profile. And once you have done this, you will, a great subset of patients, we'll find out some cause for raised liver enzymes, and we will, then we obviously, we have to start treating that. But suppose after this, we do not reach anywhere. That is the time when we have to go for the second line investigations, which I call second line. There's no such differentiation, which I call second line, because these investigations are now very expensive. So we have to come to it after we have excluded the common causes. And in second line investigations, the investigations which we get done are, number one, the autoimmune markers to rule out autoimmune liver disease, in which we get ANA, asthma, anti-LKM, and sometimes soluble liver antigen also. To exclude Wilson, we get a serum ceruloplasmin done and slit lamp examination for KF rings. For alpha-1 antitrypsin, we get the alpha-1 antitrypsin level genotype sometimes. If there is a strong suspicion patient has some kind of lung disease along with it, then we go for it. So second line investigations after the first line in patients in which we want to investigate further. Once we have done this, we have not reached anywhere, but what we need to see is that there are some non-hepatic causes also of raised transaminases. We should keep our eyes and ears open to these when we are dealing with these patients. And some of the important non-hepatic causes which we should exclude is one, celiac disease. Celiac disease, you now know, it's a kind of a epidemic. These days, we find so many adult onset asymptomatic celiac disease in our clinical practice. And in celiac disease, it was seen that 10% of celiac disease will have asymptomatic rise in their liver enzymes. So this should be excluded, and exclusion is very easy. We get IgA, anti-TTG, or anti-endomycin antibodies done, and this way we can exclude celiac disease. Muscle disease may sometimes cause raised ALT, ALT, so they should be excluded, and we should get a CPK and aldolase done in these patients. Thyroid disorders, very common cause of deranged LFT. I think this should also, the threshold of getting a thyroid profile should be very low when we are dealing with these patients. And then obviously one cardiac cause which I would like to indicate is CHF, because I've seen mistakes being made on this. When patient had a pain right hypochondrium, it had a large liver, we always thought that it was a liver disease, but actually it was a congestive heart failure which was being missed. So to get a echocardiography. So starting with history, physical examination, going on to viral markers, getting concurrently the metabolic profile, moving on to second line liver disorders, and finally to see for non-hepatic causes. And once we have done this profile, I think we will be through about 90% of patients will find out something or the other which may be the cause for his raised transaminases. So next, and the most difficult investigation which comes, if after all this we are nowhere, then what to do? Now, this brings us to the liver biopsy, which we all know is an invasive thing. Timing is very difficult. That when should we really suggest our patient liver biopsy? We are afraid to do it. The patient is afraid to getting it done, because liver biopsy is something which is associated with complication rates. It is associated, although very minuscule, but it is associated with mortality also. So we have to really see and judge and decide whether this patient now requires a liver biopsy. But if it is required, it is required, because studies show that post biopsy, the diagnosis was offered in about 14% of cases in one of these studies, and treatment regimens were also, we might pick up a disease which was not picked up by all other non-invasive ways. So liver biopsy is an important tool in diagnosis, totally obscure rise in AST, ALT, but the timing is important because it's an invasive investigation with potential complications also. So I think after liver biopsy, there will be very few patients which will be left in which we cannot find, but still, it is not the end. There will still be patients in which the cause probably is still not obvious after doing all this. Now, I have left one investigation which I like to bring in here, because I wanted to take it absolutely separately, and which is a very important tool these days in our hands, is transient elastography of liver, or FibroScan, with how it is commonly known as. This is basically trying to know the liver stiffness with the help of ultrasound and quantifying it, and on basis of this quantification, trying to segregate the patient whether they are normal, they have mild fibrosis, moderate fibrosis, or they are full-blown cirrhosis. So this is a tool which is now available to us. It is available at many places now, and it is relatively, the investigation not very expensive also. It's about 4,000 to 5,000 at various centers. So this is something which we now utilize to at least exclude that there is some significant liver problem in a patient who has come with raised transaminases. And this problem is basically in terms of fibrosis. This is how the FibroScan machine looks like. It is just like a portable ultrasound machine. Outdoor investigation takes about 5 minutes to do, very reproducible. You can do it as many times. It's non-invasive and cheap. And this is how the report comes. For example, in this, the E value is 5.6. So this patient is normal, no significant fibrosis. Probably this might prompt us that maybe there may be some other cause for raised transaminases, and it is not the liver disease, or at least the liver disease patient does not have significant liver disease, so his anxiety is relieved. So I think somewhere in the algorithm, we have to put in FibroScan also, probably definitely before liver biopsy, and maybe before second line investigation also, because the cost is almost similar of liver biopsy. So based on all this, the algorithm lastly which I would propose is, it is not an algorithm which is given by any recognized society or something. It's an algorithm which we follow, and I think which is helpful, is that any patient, asymptomatic patient who comes with elevated transaminases, do a complete history and a physical examination in this patient. You will pick up a lot of clues there. And then if you get a history which is suggestive of any drugs or alcohol, then stop this. Stop all non-essential drugs, stop alcohol, and a repeat LFT after about 2 months. If it is still elevated, proceed towards investigations, get a viral marker profile in all the patients, get blood sugar, lipid profile, hemoglobin A1C, and ultrasound in almost all the patients who have persistent increase in transaminases. If something comes positive in this, investigate and treat accordingly. Suppose it's diabetes, is a diabetic, treat accordingly. If everything is negative, then you move on to second-line investigations. In second-line investigations, exclude other diseases of liver like autoimmune liver disease, Wilson's disease, hemochromatosis, depending on what the clinical file suggests or what is common in that population. And then also exclude non-hepatic causes here, exclude CHF, exclude thyroid. Thyroid is a very cheap investigation, exclude occult hypothyroidism or thyrotoxicosis, exclude celiac disease in all these patients. And if something is positive, investigate further. And if nothing still comes out, then go for a liver biopsy. And somewhere in between, go for a fibroscan. So I think this is the way we should move. Shriram, what is the time? Do I have a minute more?
No. Time is over.
1 minute more? or do I conclude?
Please conclude. Because
okay, I'll conclude here. Rest was I had to examples to show how difficult these things can be sometimes. So, okay, I'll give you one example just to make the audience. I'll take just 30 seconds to give it. Okay, now this was a case I remember from my practice, but this was about 20 years ago. Businessman, leather exporter from Kanpur, who had a persistently elevated transaminases for 2 years. Now, in this patient, we got, we took a history. He was not alcoholic, he was non-diabetic, his lipid profile was normal, HbS was negative, NTHC was negative, blood sugar was normal, lipid profile, ultrasound, everything was negative. And then we contemplated that nothing was coming at that time. We didn't have fibroscan. We were contemplating liver biopsy. At that time, the second line investigations were also done. They were all normal. And that time, something interesting happened that he developed a skin allergy. Now, this time he went to a skin specialist who tried to know the exposure to his allergens further. And in that, he found out that since he was a leather exporter, he was generally dealing with the production part. And he was exposed to a chemical which was known as N-dimethyl formide, which is used in liver industries, which probably was not the cause for his skin allergy. But when we searched the literature, we found out that this was probably a hepatotoxin gas, which we was being exposed to. We stopped the exposure. In 3 months' time, the enzymes normalized. We were treating him with UDCA. We stopped that. And then after another 6 months, the enzymes were still normal. So this is just an example to show that how important sometimes a short occupational history can be when all the other investigations will not help us and things can be so interesting. So I think with this, I conclude my talk. Thank you. Thank you for your patient hearing.